Talk about first about your rallying experience, which from our discussions, I can see you have a certain fondness for that phase of your life, the beginnings, and you started your racing career doing cross-country rallies and had early successes in the prestigious Monte Carlo rally, which you mentioned last night, with a Porsche 911S, of which this is a replica. What about rallying? Because when I talked to you, you seemed to be excited about all the different phases of rallying, because it wasn't just the car, it was the road, it was the atmosphere, the temperature, the outside environment. What is it about rallying that turns you on so much?
I don't know. I guess you pretty well summed it up. It's all of that. You know, it's not just, okay, can anybody hear okay? Is the sound looking good? Okay. It's not just going round and round a 2.5 mile circuit, you know, 100 times for an afternoon. The thing about rallying is, or one of the things about it, you're always going somewhere. The conditions are always a little susceptible to change, because you might, as indeed on some track like the Nürburgring, for example, you might start off on a special stage in the sunshine, and 30 minutes later you're driving through torrential rain or a snowstorm. I think it's more adventurous than rallying. I think the car control is more explicit. I think the best rally driver in the world is probably the best driver in the world, period, rather than racing drivers being at that level. Which means that right now the best driver in the world is probably Sébastien Loeb, the French driver driving the Citroën, who's now been world champion 7 years running, can you believe? And he is almost unbeatable. He also went to Le Mans a couple of times and drove very well there, so it sort of backs up my theory that the rally drivers are ultimately the best. Beyond that, I can't really say without any specifics, you know, it's just the whole adventure part of rallies that really got to me. We used to go to places that we would never go to otherwise. For example, there was one classic rally, we were talking about this earlier, way back in the mid-60s, there was in the 50s actually, there was a rally called Liège-Rome-Liège, which was basically a road race from Liège in Belgium, down over the Dolomite Mountains into Italy, all the way to Rome and back. And typically it was won by Porsche 356s and then 550s, and then with the tourist traffic in Italy, it became unpopular, so the organisers simply moved it, and we went down through Yugoslavia, and again it went from, I'm trying to draw the map your way around, from Liège in Belgium, down through Germany, into the northern part of Yugoslavia, the whole length of Yugoslavia into Bulgaria, to Sofia, the capital, and back against the clock. 84 hours, 4 nights and 3 days, non-stop on the road. Well, that was exciting. A little bit more exciting than driving around a 2.5 mile road track.
That's interesting, and of course, probably more than any other type of racing, knowledge of the course was pivotal to your success.
In some rallies, yes, Fred. In that one, no, because we would do the complete route and make notes, but we couldn't make pace notes. Some of you I know have read my book or other things. I'm going to get told off. Okay, good. But I can't hear it yet. Good. Too loud. Is that, whoops. Is that okay? At the back? Okay, not too loud? Okay. On a rally like or an event like the Liège-Sofia-Liège, we couldn't do full pace notes because it was simply too long. And so it was fairly improvising all the time there. With other more concentrated rallies, like Monte Carlo, for example, we would have maybe a special stage of 40 kilometers, 25 miles, which would go up one side of a mountain and down the other. And for events like that, we could go out and make very, very detailed pace notes. By pace notes, I mean that the co-driver, we would make them together, and we would practice 3, 4, maybe half dozen times over this any particular section. we would make a series of shorthand notes, which those of you who've got my book, or my first driving book, you can see in the back how it all works. For those of you who haven't got it, the co-driver would be reading back to me a sort of shorthand report on what was coming. And in theory, I could drive over a road I had never ever seen before in my life, under any conditions, absolutely at maximum speed. And we actually proved it once. I was driving a Ferrari Daytona, which is a big, brutal, noisy car, on the Tour de France, and we had a special stage down in the Pyrenees Mountains on the Spanish border with France. Again, a typical rally stage, up one side of a mountain, down the other, so there was no great advantage to the power going up. It was equalised. And I had never ever been able to see this special stage. I hadn't been there, hadn't practiced it. My co-driver went with a little recorder, recorded it, wrote it down on paper, went back again up and down a few times in a rental car, making notes, changing it, getting it perfect as he could. And then when we came to doing the event on the rally, we did it around 6 o'clock in the morning. It was cold, raining, foggy. There was Georgia-type liquid clay all over the road, running down from the hills. And we set the fastest time on a road I'd never seen before. That is how good pace notes were. But on an event like Liège-Sophia-Liège, it was impossible to do 4,000 miles of pace notes. And so there it was up to the driver to just simply try and remember and try and anticipate. And you find in Europe, I probably would apply over here, but I never did rallies in the United States, so I don't know. But you find that depending on where you are, there are certain parts of the Alps, for example, in France, and you very rapidly find that they have a form to them. You know, they might be swinging and curvy like that, or they might be straights with hairpin corners, straights with hairpin corners. You very easily pick up a rhythm in different areas and even different countries.
Speaking of books, in your Reflections on a Golden Era of Motorsport, which by the way I highly recommend, it's a fabulous book. That's it talks about when you started with Porsche, and the question that's been asked by several of our members is, what was the pay structure for drivers, say, in 1968?
What was what, sorry?
The pay structure. How did at that stage of the game?
Wasn't terribly brilliant by today's standard. First of all, I had been, my first rally with a Porsche was actually in 1966. I'd had 3 years with Ford. I'd had some good results, and then in the last year, some pretty terrible results, partly due to Ford, partly due to Lucas making mistakes. I won the Italian rally and got this in a Lotus Cortina and got disqualified because Ford had made mistakes in the paperwork, in the homologation papers. I led the Alpine rally, the Coupe des Alpes, the whole way in a Lotus Cortina, even leading the GT cars like Ferraris, Porsches, Maseratis, and a little Lucas part broke about 20 minutes from the end, so I didn't even finish that one. And I was getting a little bit upset with Ford, so when we got to the end of that event, I went and found Huschler von Hanstein and asked him if I could drive a Porsche. They hadn't entered any 911s in official rallies then, not from the factory, but one or two private owners had started to enter them, and I was impressed with just what it looked like. It looked like it was going to be right. And he said, well, you know, we don't have any money for rallies, we don't have a budget, we don't have a program, and Ferdinand Piëch, who was in charge of racing, really wasn't interested in rallies at all. He thought rallies was a sort of poor man's sport. He was only interested in winning outright races like Le Mans, Daytona, Nürburgring, other classics. But Huschler said, okay, I'll tell you what, I can't give you any money, but I'll lend you a car to go to Corsica. So he lent me a 911 to go to Corsica, which was a tremendous event. It was literally then a tour of Corsica, about 1,000 miles around the island of Corsica, not just around, but all in the mountains. There is only one very short, straight road on the Isle of Corsica, from the city of Bastia down to the airport, which is about 10 miles.